Hey everyone, welcome to House Blend. I'm Nash Middleman, your Bay Area real estate guru, and I got Robert Ring with me today. House hacking wizard, lending connoisseur, and Bay Area guru yourself. Robert, what are you
Love your
drinking today?
adjectives, or I guess the nouns, huh? Gurus, wizards, connoisseurs, sommeliers.
Proactive, trusted advisors,
Exactly.
all that good stuff.
All of it.
What are you drinking?
I am drinking a high wire espresso cappuccino.
That's cool. What's your coffee shirt today? I asked you about that too.
Yeah. So, coffee shop. I don't even know if this is around anymore. They might have closed it down or sold it. I think there's one in Alamo. But it was like a specialty coffee shop in Walnut Creek before Rooted took over. I like Rooted, but they don't use real milk, so I actually don't really like Rooted. They have good coffee, but I like real milk.
You got it. You got to be on top of your milk game if you got a coffee shop.
I agree. And there's this big trend to go into oat milk. I think I've told you this before, but oat milk is full of glyphosate and phytic acid, and it's like terrible for you. So I don't touch oat milk.
Yeah, well, Highwire is going to get a huge shout out today because I'm also drinking Highwire. But you're drinking the core. I got a subscription to the coffee program,
Oh, cool. Right on.
so I'm just going to cycle through probably a bag of decaf and then a bag of like caffeinated and probably mix them together so I can lower my caffeine intake, but not decrease the amount of cappuccinos that I drink.
How many cappuccinos do you drink a day?
This is number 2. But it's decaf, so like it's just fun to drink all day, every day, especially on a rainy day like today. So
Totally. Yeah, I signed up for their subscription too, so I get £2 a month. I'll probably end up doing a little more than a month because I go through 2.5 pounds a month. It's kind of like my exact sweet spot because I measure it out. I mean, we know how much we use for a shot, right?
yeah,
And it's cool. My buddy picks it up for me because he works right next to the shop. But when you order from their subscription, they roast it the day that you pick it up, so it's like super fresh.
that's why I love it because you got to have a super fresh coffee to get the crema that I like, and most of the store bought coffees, I don't know, they're like at least a month old, right?
Yeah, totally. They're not very good.
No, and so.
Do you know if Highwire is organic? That's the only thing I'm concerned about that I haven't really looked into. Is it organic?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, they say that it's sustainably sourced, and I know that the every blend of beans, I guess, has a different washing and roasting process, and obviously where they get it from. I don't know if it's organic though. It'd be a good question.
Yeah, I'm on their website right here. It looks like it is organic. Well, the coffee's really good. The espresso is phenomenal. Today I put a little bit of sea salt in my espresso. I just put a little bit on the puck before I make it.
That's bougie.
Pinch. It changes the flavor, but it's good. I don't do it all the time, but it's really nice. And I use a really special sea salt from the Sea of Cortez. They can only harvest it like once a year, and it's one of the highest mineral salts in the world. So it's got like 92 trace minerals in it or something like that. Put it in my water. It's awesome. It's really good. Great for getting super hydrated if you're dehydrated.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, because if you drink like a lot of minerally deficient water, you'll just flush out minerals, and then you'll have like low nutrient absorption, and you won't be very hydrated, and you'll have to pee all the time. But if your water has like good mineral content, you won't have to pee all the time. You'll feel super hydrated, and then your body will do better with like nutrient absorption.
So, like the water that you get from this, like I don't know, call it Aquafina water. Does that have good minerals in it or no?
I don't drink bottled water, so I'm not sure. I mean, I do occasionally. I'm not like crazy about it, but I generally don't just because of microplastics that get into water.
Yeah.
So I don't know about Aquafina. I don't think Aquafina is that great. I think what is it? Crystal Geyser.
That was the one I was thinking of. Aquafina is the first one that came to mind.
There's one that I think I gotta look it up. There's one that it's either Crystal Geyser. I don't remember the brand name, but there's two sources. One is like the Sierras, and one is LA. So if you get it from the Sierras, it's good. Basically, you want like good mountain spring water. Like that's the best water. Like all this water that has like pH balance and purified and electrolyte added for taste. This is all BS. Like these waters are not very good. and they're not even that good for you. Like really, water that's good for you is like naturally mineralized, fresh mountain spring water.
Yeah.
If it says purified, like they're just not starting with good water. And so I don't know. I'm careful about my water. I don't drink tap water. They put fluoride in it, and a bunch of other stuff. I don't need.
Yeah.
I don't need some like local agency deciding what chemicals should go into my water to protect my teeth. I'm a grown ass man. I can do what I want. Plus, there's
Touche.
all these lawsuits. There was a federal lawsuit recently that said that cities should take fluoride out of their water because it's stunting the IQ of children. Based on this study they did, it was a peer-reviewed study, and so now cities all over the country are removing fluoride from their water. And we get enough fluoride; it's in our toothpaste, but yeah, we don't need it in our drinking water, and that goes on our
Yeah.
skin. I mean, it's like there's a lot of problems with. First of all, I think it's extremely egotistical for these scientists who will always tell you, "Oh, it's the scientific consensus. We're going to put poison in your water." I'm like, "Shut up! I'm not drinking your water. I'm drinking my own." So I
Yeah.
get my own water. I put minerals in it. But I also take like 35 vitamins a day. Like, gotta stay woke when it comes to your
Stay
health.
agile.
Yeah, exactly.
It's all good. I appreciate you being here, man. I wanted to talk to you about hot topic these days. Times new person of the year, President-elect Trump,
Yeah,
and his proposed plan for housing and how that's going to impact the Bay Area. Because I know there are a lot of things in the works, and I know Biden proposed some things before he even dropped out of the election. But I was looking at those too, and I'm like, these don't even like apply to the Bay Area market because the tax credits are going to be too low, or the income's going
yeah.
to be too low to even buy a house. But nonetheless, I mean, I'm curious what your thoughts are on some of his housing policies and how that's going to impact the Bay Area market. It seems like some of his policies are kind of contradicting themselves and might do the opposite of what he's trying to do. So
Yeah, I should have studied his housing policies leading up to this because I haven't heard him talk a lot about specific housing policies. But I will say that, from a federal standpoint, it's hard to enact policies that will make a big difference in an area like the Bay Area. If you enact federal policy, like you mentioned before we got on here, like freeing up federal land to build housing. 82% of the land in Arizona, for instance, is I think it's 82 or 84. It is federally owned. I think 19% is tribal owned, and the rest is federal land, Bureau of Land Management, stuff like that. So, I mean, in an area like Arizona, yeah, you could build more housing if you freed up federal land. I could see that happening, but there's probably also a lot of undeveloped private land that could be developed. The Bay Area, it's not so much we have a lack of land. We've got plenty of land, and we can go, out into more spaces. But there's a lot of regulation in California that make it difficult to build homes, especially for people like you and me that just want to go out and build a house, right? And so we have this disparity, which has been going on for decades, which is that there are way more housing formations than there are housing starts. A housing formation is somebody who hits, let's say 29, 30 years old, they get married, they want to have kids, it's a new family, they're moving out of their parents' house. That's a housing formation, right? So in 30 years, my kids will be a housing formation, right? And so for every housing formation, you want to have a house built, you want to have a housing start. And and I think that I'm not 100% sure on this, but I think a housing start can also qualify as net subtractions of people out of the state. So if people leave the state, we kind of balanced out, housing formations versus housing starts. But we're behind like 6-1 in the Bay Area for housing starts to housing formations. We need 5 times more homes being built than are already being built. And we need way more than that because it's been happening for a really, really long time. And this is why there's so much lopsided demand, which leads to like an unhealthy appreciation in value, which also leads to a sharp decline in affordability. So the only thing that's slowing this right now are interest rates because affordability is low. But if you go back to when interest rates were low, we had a few years where you could see increases of around it started around 5 and then 7 and then 9 and then 10 and then 14, and I think it peaked at like 17% appreciation in values annually. If you look at parts of the Bay Area, and that's really not healthy because if you want to keep a healthy real estate market in play, then incomes should really drive up home prices, what people can afford to pay. And if somebody's income is going to go up by, let's say 2.5% per year, which is about the average, then home values should go up a little bit less than that, 2.25%, 2% per year, right? And that should be pulling up home values, not artificially, reduced interest rates, not lopsided, housing starts, and so demand is all messed up. And California really needs to get right on this. And there have been some good movements. I have to give some credit to Gavin Newsom for some of the work that he's done on making it easier to build houses, to build ADUs. That adds housing, to the supply, because we're not just talking about, houses that people buy, but literal physical units of housing. And so, but a lot more needs to be done. Like if you want to go build a house, for instance, like in Dublin, I think you're going to pay like $120,000 in permit fees and impact fees. And that's just crazy. That should not be the case. It should be really cheap. It should be really easy. Follow the code, but build the house and make it simple. And for that reason, it's only affordable for big home builders to do this, because they can do economies of scale. But at the same time, it's so expensive, and this is because of inflation also, and lumber prices and labor prices, etc., that it's not worth it for home builders to build affordable homes, like, inexpensive homes, let's say. They make money, their profit center peaks when they're building $1 million plus homes. So if they want to go build 6,000 homes on the mountain on the side of San Ramon, they're not building $500,000 homes. They're not building, prefab manufactured. They're not making it accessible to the masses. And this is true all over the Bay Area, not just in a high luxury spot like, San Ramon. And so, some things definitely need to change. I think we need some concessions from the government, but really from the local government around, regulations to build new houses, around impact fees. I think impact fees are totally out of control. And until we do that, I think we're going to have a hard time seeing an increase. And I think there should be inducements. I think if you have, and I'll explain that. I think if you have a big home builder that wants to come into your community and build a lot of homes for the masses, you should say, hey, if you build homes that people can afford to buy, not mandated affordability, but like just affordable, normal, like rancher homes, 1,200 square feet, 3-bed, 2-bath, normal homes, right? Not $1 million mansions. If you build those, then we're going to give you inducements. Like we're going to give you tax breaks. We're going to give you tax credits. We're going to give you permit fee reduction. We're going to waive impact fees. I mean, there has to be some inducement to get stuff off the ground. And we wouldn't be here if we didn't create this environment that it's so difficult to build, as it is now. But I mean, there's so many laws in the state of California. Take CEQA, for example, which is our Environmental Protections Act in the state of California. You have to do an environmental study before you build, right? If you go do a development. And so I'm not saying that's bad, but it can really hold up and add a lot of costs to building. So, could something like CEQA be reformed and streamlined? Could there be government, streamlined processes where they go in and say, hey, this land is passed if you want to go build houses on it. So it's not all on the developers to go in and jump through all the loopholes that the state has put in there. Because at the end of the day, they are for-profit companies, and they're not going in there to, make the state money. They're going in there to make themselves money. So if they've got to go spend $10 million on a project to pass a CEQA compliance, then all that money gets charged to the end user. And the more hoops that we make people jump through, and there's other laws that you could look at that lead to this as well, lead to higher home prices for buyers, and higher home prices lead to lower affordability, higher amounts of gentrification, which is bad when you look at blue collar workers not being able to live close to the areas in which they work. You want a micro economy where you have a diversity of class structures, and that helps the economy hum along well. You don't want little Athertons all over the place where, Bob the plumber and John the electrician, and whoever can't go and buy a house in their community. They've got to bus in from 2 hours away. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of going all over the place here. But when you look at like a federal policy, I think it's really more state. And I think the one thing that the feds could do, and this all has to get passed through Congress, is give inducements to states to say, like, hey, if you trim regulation or streamline processes or cut impact fees or give them inducements to build more affordable style housing and really increase units, etc., then you'll get benefits from us. And one thing that the state has done, which I'll give them some credit for this as well, is now every locality, every city and county has to pass a housing element every 8 years to show how they're going to keep up with there's an acronym for it, and I'm blanking on it right now, but it's there's a mandated minimum number of units that they have to build. Um, housing starts that they have to add to their community, and you have to tell the state how you're going to do that. And so if you have a whole bunch of land that's zone ag or commercial, you've got to go edit your general plan and say, hey, we're going to annex this area over here and we're going to build 5,000 homes on it. Here's how we're going to do it. But at the same time, even though the state's mandating affordable housing in that, the bulk of the units that are added are going to be unaffordable for most people. And I think that's really the problem. So the more you dig into this, you'll see there's a lot of tribalism, there's a lot of groups, there's a lot of opposing viewpoints, there's YIMBYs, there's NIMBYs, no in my backyard, yes in my backyard, which is kind of like, what do we build and where do we build it, right? I mean, there's some places where people don't want 400 apartment buildings, unit apartment buildings going up in their backyard behind their $2 million homes in San Ramon or Danville, right? And that would be the NIMBYs. And then there's the YIMBYs who say, yeah, we got to build on every available plot of land. And then whenever you do a big housing development, you have to have a density of affordable housing, whether that's usually it's 25 to 35%, right? And when you do that, you'll see nonprofit housing groups come out of the woodworks to say, oh, well, you have to build this type. And what they really want to do is build block affordable housing, which is below market rate rentals only that are managed by them because they get a management fee from it. And they lobby for this sort of thing. And if you disagree with them, they'll draw people out of the woodwork and they'll line them up out the door and they'll say, you're evil because you don't want to build below market rate rentals. Well, below market rate rentals is one form of affordable housing. It's not the most successful. The most successful is really subsidized rentals. Section 8 is the most successful, I'd say. Behind that, other forms that you could add in there, which are accepted by the state and by the federal government, are things like deed restricted homes. Like, let's say you want to go buy a house in $1 million community. There's going to be one for $500,000 because you make a plumber's salary and you're not a tech worker, right? But you can't go turn around and sell that home for $1 million. It's got a deed restriction that says you can only have appreciation of 2 to 3% per year unless you own it for 45 years. And so there's things like this that can be done. The state of California, HCD, which is the Housing and Community Development in the state of California, says that accessory dwelling units and junior accessory dwelling units are considered a form of affordable housing. But if you're going to build a big development and you say we're going to do 10% of our 35% density of affordable housing as junior ADUs on these homes, you'll have the nonprofit groups, lining up out the door to say, no, you're a bad person. We need block affordable housing. And the problem I have with this, the really big problem I have with this is they're perpetuating like class neighborhoods. Basically, they're building out ghettos, right? So if they say we're going to build all these $1 million homes over here, and then we're going to build, 500 units over here, and they're all going to be the below market rate rentals for the poor people, and this is all the homes for the rich people. I think it should be spread out. I think it should be diversified. I think it should be mixed in. I think the type, the style, even down to the design of the units that you're putting in should be spread out, so you're not having rich and poor neighborhoods. I think this is really kind of comes down to the heart of the issue. But the way that the money flows for all these things, that's usually what ends up happening because it's the cheapest to build, and the most amount of money flows into the people who lobby the heaviest for it. And so, what could Trump administration do to fix housing in the Bay Area? I mean, I don't know, maybe reach across the aisle and sit down with his good friend, Gavin Newsom, and make some, common sense plans to work together to help increase. Really, we just need more housing. If you go to places like let's say Waco, Texas, right? Waco, Texas has a pretty good housing starts to housing formation. I think they're 1-to-1. At least they were a couple of years ago, right? So it's not everywhere in the country that you see this crazy lopsided system where you can't build enough houses to meet the number of people in your area that are, forming a household.
Yeah, I mean, so he's talking about like deregulating building codes and building on federal land. The federal land out here, like we got a ton of land, but like federal land or like state parks and not necessarily people want to live. And to your point, he's also talking about building on federal land that doesn't have infrastructure to like get utilities to or freeways or whatever.
Yeah.
So, and you touched on some key points too, like affordability, and that's one of the bigger challenges out here in the Bay Area is it's so unaffordable to buy a house. So what's his plan to like bring down affordability, lower inflation? He's talking about these tariffs, which I think can like actually increase a builder's cost to build, right?
Well, it did last time. I mean, the tariffs that he put on China made like certain construction materials more expensive. Like if you went to go buy granite countertops, Most of them had like a 10% increase in prices because of the tariffs, unless you bought it from Spain. His main thing about tariffs is to use them as deterrence, which I think works, but I think you got to be careful about it because if you put the tariff on it and it doesn't have the deterring action that you want, then you just have a tariff, and that's going to increase costs to the consumer. And we are a consumer nation. We are a big buyer of things, and so we need to, I think, be conscientious of that. But like when he says he's going to put a 100% tariff on Mexico or something, or Canada, they're going to scramble to work something out before that actually goes into effect.
Hey, hang on.
The madman theory is a political theory, and it's if you look this up on Wikipedia, I'll just read some of these points here. But it's commonly associated with Richard Nixon's administration. He wanted the leaders of hostile communist bloc nations to think that he was irrational and volatile, so that they would avoid provoking the United States in fear of like an unpredictable response. Some people are skeptical of this theory. I don't think it worked so well for Nixon because I don't think you could just decide that you're a madman and people will believe you. But this is what Trump, wants to do. I mean, he wants people to believe he's a madman, and it sort of worked for Trump. Machiavelli argued that sometimes it is a very wise thing to stimulate madness. So that's what Trump is trying to do, I think, with tariffs. We'll see how it goes. I think you've got to be careful with tariffs. And you're starting to see some pushback from certain, leaders of other nations that say they'll try and fight. You don't want to get into a trade war. The best outcome you can hope for is that whatever action the president is trying to deter with the tariff, he or she will deter, and then they won't do the tariff. But like when Biden came into office, he kept some of Trump's tariffs on China. So, there is a use for tariffs, and we'll see how it goes. I think that the biggest thing that could help. The president likes to say, any president or presidential candidate likes to say that they can, sort of like wave a magic wand. Got my little LED light here, and and fix problems, but they can't. They have to do it through, some things they can do through executive action. Some things they have no jurisdiction over. They can just kind of pressure states to do. A lot of things they have to do through, congressional and Senate approval. And getting things passed through the Congress and the Senate is a mess. I mean, just look at the first time that the Trump administration had all three. They had the Congress, the Senate, and the White House. They couldn't even reform healthcare, and he wanted to keep the pre-existing condition in, which I thought was good. But Paul Ryan was the speaker, and Paul Ryan just basically let the healthcare lobby write the bills, and they couldn't get anything done. And so
on that point too, like if it takes forever to get the federal, say they want to deregulate building on housing, right?
Yeah.
In the Bay Area, in areas like Oakland, Berkeley, I don't know about Concord, but I know Oakland and Berkeley are extremely hard to build on.
Yeah.
If they deregulate building codes, would that supersede Oakland and Berkeley building codes, or would local jurisdictions likely have their own stuff still?
No, they don't have control over building codes. They just don't. I mean, it's state building codes. There are certain examples where federal codes do override state codes. Like if you're going to build let's say a HUD, Housing and Urban Development, has HUD approved manufactured housing units, like pre-built, units. I built one. They're Title 24 exempt. Title 24 is a energy code in the state of California that kind of updates every year, and now it says that you can't have like gas appliances, can't have gas water heaters, can't have gas stoves, etc. However, if you buy a HUD-approved unit, you don't have to follow those. So, like my HUD-approved unit has a gas stove and a gas water heater and a gas heater. So, there are some ways around it, but they can't just go, "Hey, we're going to change the building codes in the city of Oakland." He has no jurisdiction to do that whatsoever. I think Newsom should do it. I think he should work with his lawmakers and go towards policies to make it easier to build. We have to be environmentally conscientious, but we have to be realistic, because I think that it's very easy to ignore the unintended consequences of certain policies that make it difficult to build. For the sake of let's say you're benefiting the environment over here, but you're hurting it because you can't. I mean, you're hurting your own people. You're causing things to go through the roof, prices to spike, people to be displaced. You don't want like this extreme gentrification where people can't live in the area that they work, like I mentioned earlier. And I think that's one of the end results of, you could look at this with rent control policies also. I think rent control policies are garbage. We just passed them here in Concord. I think it's terrible. And they're like, oh, well, there's not enough, rental units. Like, we'll build more than that, right? But what they're doing is now a lot of people are selling their rental properties. And all these advocates that came in and said, I couldn't afford to rent, but I was fortunate enough, and then I was able to buy. But not everybody can buy, so we need rent control. And I'm like, you don't even know what you're saying. Like, the house that you bought, if it was a rental, is now one less rental unit on the market. And now
Yeah.
a whole bunch of people are selling their rental properties, and guess what's going to happen to rent prices? They're going to go through the roof because people they don't want to hold on to rentals. You want a community where you have a lot of rentals, because it'll keep rental prices low. If you don't need rent control, if there's enough units on the market and you have friendly laws for landlords, because people will come in and say, yeah, I want to own rentals in this community. And if there's a lot of people that own rentals in a community, and Nash says, well, hey, I'm jacking your rent up $500 a month and I'm kicking you out in 2 months, say, fine, screw you. I'm gonna go rent from Bob down the street for $500 less. And that's just an aspect of a free market, capitalism that I'd say if you mess with, then you cause a lot of unintended consequences that hurt the people that you're trying to help. And that happens a lot, way more than you would think, with sort of like these. I don't even call them leftists because it's such a weird faction of people. I mean, even there's infighting within that, but it's people that are really like ideologically driven in a certain direction on housing. They think that they're right, and it's usually stemming from nonprofit housing groups that whose main ulterior motive is to have communities build these massive block affordable housing structures where they get the license to manage them and they collect 35% of the rents. I mean, it's money's the root of all evil, and they're not immune to it.
So speaking of money is the root of all evil, he was proposing federal housing assistance. I don't know if you've seen anything about that, but Biden also tried it too for like lower income households. But I saw this stat the other day that like to buy a house in is it San Bruno County? They're on the peninsula, San Mateo County. You have to make 500. Your household has to make $500,000 a year. San Francisco is close behind it. It's like 420,000 average to own a single family house in San Francisco. Alameda County is 350,000, but that's still like
build
a
more houses.
pretty penny.
Build more houses. Go out and build 100,000 more houses. If you build more houses, they won't be that expensive. Because it's just a supply issue, right? I'm the only hot dog vendor on the mountain. Hot dogs are expensive. There's 50 hot dog vendors. Hot dogs are cheap. They're 150.
Yeah.
Right? It's the whole same principle. So this is really a problem. It's hopefully an endemic now that we're facing, but it doesn't feel like it. It's been addressed. It's been looked at. It's not been resolved, and it needs to be. It needs to start really at the state level. And I wish our lawmakers could agree. Federal incentives would be great. Whatever President Trump can do to incentivize states and localities to deregulate in order to build, I think is good. We need way, way, way more housing. We've got thousands of units over here in Concord. I don't know if it's thousands. I think it's thousands that were bought by a developer out of Las Vegas, and the city won't let them use them because they say, well, they're not up to current standard building codes. I'm like, well, is my 1950s rancher built with asbestos up to standard codes? I mean, no, but people still live in them, right? So let them open up these units over here. Let them rent them out. Let them make money on their investment and add the units. And so they do these sort of things where they're like, we're going to be good. We're not going to let people live in bad houses. It's like, well, you're hurting people because people need more rentals. If you have more rentals on the market, rents will be cheaper. People need places to live close to where they work. And they're restricting thousands of units in my backyard from being rented out because of ideologically driven. At least that's the reason they give. I don't think it really is the reason. I think they want to. I think what their thought is it's included in their what they want to develop for the big naval weapons station over here, which is a whole other topic we don't even want to get into today. But yeah, all roads lead back to one thing, and that is housing supply.
Yeah. All right. What about this one? Housing builders are fearing deportations for labor costs. It's another example of how like Trump's proposed policies could actually end up hurting him because you got a lot of undocumented construction workers, so home builders are fearing mass deportations and high inflation costs on tariffs that could actually hurt helping.
Yeah, I think there's two ways to look at this. I think there's one that's like, how does it look on paper? And number two, like, how will it look in reality? I personally think they're going to start with, and they've said this, at least JD has said it over and over again, that they're going to start with people who, are convicted criminals. and they're going to get them out first. And there's so many people that probably could be deported before it would have that impact because of how many people have come in. That I think by the time that they get there, they'll probably look at like a common sense legislation to just give people visas. Because if we need workers for certain things, we should give them visas. We shouldn't be like, oh, let's protect them staying here illegally. It's like, no, like let them live a normal life. Like you don't want people to be suffering in your community that are working to build houses,
Yeah.
build infrastructure. And so I think when you say we're going to deport all the illegals, it's like illegal migrants have been building houses and working in agricultural and kitchens and basically service and labor positions for decades. And over that period of time, we've had an influx of millions and millions and millions of people that have come here illegally. And I think it really it hurts us in a sense because it definitely you don't want like mass illegal immigration. It changes the society. Look, New York, they're having a terrible time with it. But like there's a lot of people that can be deported before I think that's really an issue. And I think as they're doing that, they should, if they're not going to do this, it would be really stupid. They should look at giving people visas, to work here. If you say, hey, we need a certain amount of people to work in kitchens and agriculture and construction, it's like that's a realistic thing. And there are, if you go down to border towns, there are a lot of people that migrate back and forth across the border every day that work in agriculture, that live in Mexico and work in the United States, that have a visa that go across the border every day to go work in fields. And you're right, we do need those. And so, Trump's a real estate guy. He's a developer. I hope that he'll look at this realistically. I think what we hear from him is really broad stroke stuff. And I hope that when things actually get enacted, that there's a little more nuance and thought put into it. And we'll see what happens. I don't know. I was a little disappointed with his last administration because he didn't do really anything to address the deficit problem. Which was huge to me. He didn't really fix the immigration problem, even though he said he was going to. And so I think, my whole take on the thing was like, look, if we're going to get the guy again that everybody hates, the Jews better be worth the squeeze. Like, actually just get, like, it needs to get some stuff done. Because, like, we have to put up with this for 4 years. And by say put up with it, it's like, it makes for uncomfortable conversations. He's extremely divisive. People get really inflamed and angry over these things. So, like when I say the juice better be worth the squeeze, like do what you say you're going to do. If you're really going to secure the border, if you're really going to, fix inflation, if you're really going to fix housing prices, if you're really going to address the deficit, I think one of the biggest threats facing the housing industry and the economy as a whole is really our deficit. We're about a decade away from a national debt crisis where we run out of money to pay our minimum interest on our bills. We're about 9 years away from not being able to pay Social Security, and we're going into debt at the amount of $2 trillion a year. And that's not sustainable. And because of that, our 10-year U.S. Treasury has gone through the roof. And our bond prices are suffering, our mortgage-backed security prices, which were historically thought of as, even modern historically thought of as a safe haven for institutional investors. An institutional investor is not somebody like you and me. It's somebody who, it's an institution that has an institutional investing license that does trades 30, 40, 50 million at a time. And whenever there was international crisis, like Greece went bankrupt or tsunamis in Japan or October 7th attack on Israel, you would see money flow into our mortgage-backed securities market because they said this is a safe place to put money. And when they did that, our mortgage rates would go down. And that was good for our economy. That helped balance things out. And that stopped happening under the Biden administration. And I think that it's less squarely to say, oh, Biden, it's all your fault. I think it's sort of like the straw that broke the camel's back. We've had these practices for years and years and years and years now where we just say, hey, we need to pay for more things, so we're just going to print more money and we're going to spend more money and we're going to go further into debt. And then we hit this tipping point where it's like, okay, now, the minimum interest that we have to pay on our debt that the United States owes is the largest piece of our budget, and it's unsustainable. And so there's less optimism and less confidence in the U.S. markets because of that, and because it's not getting turned around. And unless that ship gets righted, we're going to have a lot of problems. But if it does get righted, and let's say, that they do address the deficit problem, they do cut spending, and they do start to turn the ship around, and we can say that, hey, we're averting or pushing way out the possibility of a national debt crisis because nobody wants that. Because here's what happens. If you invest a bunch of money in bonds and then there's a national debt crisis and the country goes bankrupt, your bonds are worth nothing. This happened in Puerto Rico back more than a decade ago, I think. And there's people that were really wealthy that had saved their whole lives and went to go retire, and then Puerto Rico went bankrupt and their retirement policies went to zero because of what they had safely invested in, right? So if we grew optimism and confidence in the U.S. markets by fixing the deficit problem, you would see a lot more money flow into our markets. You would see a smaller yield spread premium between the 10-year U.S. Treasury and the 30-year mortgage rate. Right now, it's close to 4%, the yield spread premium, which is insane. It should be around 1.5 to 2. That's the difference between the 30-year and the 10-year U.S. T-bill. And so, I think one of the challenges that Trump's going to have as he's enacting these tariffs and these policies is how is he going to stop the U.S. T-bill from going even higher? And so that's why there was some talk around who's going to be a good Treasury Secretary pick. I thought Scott Bessent was a good one, but will he be able to use levers? Does he have that power to limit how much the U.S. T-bill can go up? Because if Trump's going to be doing things that are hurting the economy, and that T-bill continues to go up, and we have a bigger spread, we're going to see higher mortgage rates. I mean, but if he turns things around, we could see lower mortgage rates. Like if in 2 years the Department of Government Efficiency really cuts spending and builds new optimism into investing in the United States, then you could see a huge boost in the economy. You could see a huge decrease in mortgage rates, because you would see renewed optimism by institutional investors saying our bond market is the place to go when there's crises internationally. When Syria is getting, like, the whole thing that's happening with Syria, this should make mortgage rates go down like a lot. Like, if this happened 10 years ago, our rates would have dropped like 1 to 2%. Would have been insane. Syria falling, it's crazy, right? October 7th, Ukraine, all these things that are happening, people would be like, oh, screw that. We're dumping our money there. We're pulling it all out. We're putting it into the U.S. bond market. And that just didn't happen.
So $1 million question that I'm sure everybody wants to know is, you think the Trump administration is going to right the ship and bring down inflation and effectively bring down interest rates? Or you mentioned it could possibly go the other way.
Yeah, I'm optimistic. I don't know. I mean, I like I said, I was disappointed that last administration, some of the things that I thought should have been fixed weren't. Some of the things he said he was going to fix didn't get addressed. I hope so. We'll see. Argentina is a really interesting case study right now. They now have a surplus.
Good coffee over there?
Yeah, there's coffee over there. They now have a surplus. They cut government spending. They were way in the hole. They had 25% inflation, and now it's down to 2%. And they don't have a deficit anymore. They have a surplus, which is pretty incredible. And it would be nice to see something like that happen. At what cost? I don't know. I mean, they obviously have to cut spending, cut departments, but there's a lot of crap in our budget. There's a lot of stuff we spend money on that we don't have to. I'm very libertarian minded on foreign policy objectives, so I also think that we shouldn't be spending millions of dollars to Ukraine and Israel and all these countries. It's like, let them fight their own wars. There's certain times like where like Israel's an ally, right? So there's certain times where we do want to protect our sworn allies and stuff, but at the same time, like when we go to Ukraine and we spend $200 billion helping Ukraine, and then all the other European nations around Ukraine that are really the most threatened, the United States is not the most threatened by Russia annexing Ukraine, they spend 1% of that. That's not very fair. I like the Jim Baker model, who was the Secretary of State under George W. Bush and Chief of Staff for Ronald Reagan when they fought the 3-day war of Desert Storm. I think it was in the 90s. They wanted to keep out Saddam Hussein from going into Kuwait. And so they said, okay, so Jim Baker went around and raised money from all of the European allies and said, this is in all of our best interests to keep Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait. Let's go. Let's do it. And they fought that war. They pushed him out. They got it done extremely quickly. It was like 3 days. And they finished, and the generals went to H.W. Bush and said, we can now invade Iraq and go take out Saddam. And H.W. Bush rightly said, no, let's not do that. We don't need to do that. That was not our objective. We completed our objective. We don't need to go into a war. And they ended that war with a $1 billion surplus. Name me one other war where we've ended it with a surplus, let alone $1 billion surplus. We raised money for it. So that's a really good. That's and you see this. There's definitely different thought leaders and different factions of this throughout the government on both sides. You see people like in the Republican Party, like Vivek Ramaswamy, who say don't get involved in it, or Ron Paul, don't get involved in any wars. And then you see people like Lindsey Graham, who goes on MSNBC and says, we need to bomb Iran. And I'm like, no, you need to shut up. That's a stupid idea. We don't need to get involved in more conflicts, because every conflict costs a ton of money. And one of the reasons people like Lindsey Graham go out and says these things, do we really think that Lindsey Graham is so ideologically convicted and motivated and inclined to say that we need to go bomb countries we have nothing to do with? No. He gets paid to do it. How does he get paid? Because he stays in office and he's got lobbyists. And what happens is when these massive defense bills go through, they flood the pockets of companies like, Blackwater and Vanguard and all these companies that own, defense manufacturers. And what they do to squeeze these lawmakers is they go build giant manufacturing plants in the districts of these lawmakers and hire thousands of people. And then when there's a big defense bill or consideration to send money to another country, they're not sending it to the country, they're sending it to our defense makers here to send arms over there. They go, hey, you better pass that, because if you don't, we're unfortunately going to have to lay off 5,000 people in your district. Well, how mad do you think people would be if 5,000 people lost their jobs and the finger got pointed at Lindsey Graham? Mad. They get really mad. So what does Lindsey Graham do? He goes on MSNBC and says, we need to bomb Iran. It's stupid. It's idiotic. It should be outlawed. I mean, there's so much corruption that kind of grows up through the weeds that strangle these lawmakers that get them to go on TV and say this kind of stupid stuff.
Oh yeah, it's rigged, man.
So.
It's not a rigged system, but anyway, it's a faulty system for sure.
Very faulty, yeah.
You know? Cool, man. Let me see what else I got.
You just keep putting a quarter in the machine and I just keep going.
I know. I mean, that was kind of like the big stuff. The deportations, the building, the tariffs, the inflation. And like how it's gonna impact. But it's cyclical, man. I don't know. It should be interesting to see.
Yeah. One thing that's interesting about the Trump administration this time around is his party doesn't have as many what I would call neocons in it. Neocons are kind of like the old school Republicans that think that we should go to war, the Bush that dragged us into Iraq. This is one thing. Like I know somebody that knows Kamala, because obviously we're in a small community here in the Bay Area. And I talked to him. I said, she's out there bragging that like Dick Cheney was endorsing her, and I was like, I get it because he's a Republican, but like I was like, most people don't like Dick Cheney because he dragged us into war. Like, and I think that one thing that nobody's talking about is we need 100% nuclear deproliferation. We never want countries to launch or use nuclear weapon. It causes terrible atrocities, mass environmental damage, and everybody should just get rid of these weapons. They're terrible. They should be in the hands of absolutely nobody. And we should be striving for peace. Strangely, Democrats have kind of been behind a lot of wars lately, where they used to be sort of more against those. And I think in both parties, we need to have really serious conversations about peace, by whatever means necessary, but peace, not war, and avoiding war. And so, then when I say like his last administration had neocons in it, it had a lot of these people that were supportive of these wars, these never-ending wars, that were supportive of these massive establishments like these defense manufacturers and these lobbyist groups. This is why they couldn't like reform Obamacare. And when I say reform Obamacare, I just mean like Obama said you can keep your doctor and your prices won't change, and neither of those things were true, right? And maybe we can chalk it up to an unintended consequence, but it needs some reform. I think people should keep their pre-existing condition, insurance, because that's just like basic human makes sense. But like, there's a lot of reforms. Like, private equity is massive in healthcare industry, and it should not be. Like, if you have to get a helicopter ride, from here to the hospital, and it's like a 20-minute ride, they could charge you like $300,000. That didn't used to be the case. You might get a bill for $5,000 or $3,000 because that's about what it costs. But the reason it's gone through the roof is because private equity companies took advantage of a loophole in our law and healthcare systems that said that when you're receiving healthcare, you sign a document that says you agree to pay whatever's charged to you. At the same time that you sign the document, they now have merged into one signature. Most of the time, that says you agree to receive care. Well, they can't deny you care, so you can actually scratch out the part that says you agree to pay whatever you're charged. But that's how the law reads right now, that you are kind of forced to pay whatever they charge you. So these private equity companies said, okay, well, we'll come in and we'll buy the helicopter company. Now, the hospital won't own it. We'll own it. We'll lease back the helipad and we'll own the whole system. We'll pay the pilots. And they incentivize some of the doctors who are even on payroll to use these helicopters. And then they go, now we can go force, Mary to pay $400,000 for her 30-minute helicopter ride. And they do this. And if Mary says, no, I don't want to do that, she can get a judgment against her. They can lien her house. They can take a retirement account. And so this is just one of the gross abuses throughout the healthcare system that is just absolutely insane. You want to go to heart surgery. They're like, oh, it's $175,000. Where the same surgery in France is like $10,000, right?
Yeah.
And so this is the kind of stuff that can be reformed. And when Paul Ryan was in charge, who I would call a neocon, he was the Speaker of the House trying to write a healthcare reform bill. Every bill that came up was absolute trash garbage that couldn't get passed. And why? Because he let the healthcare lobbyists write it. If we're writing a bill that affects an industry, that industry should have no part in writing that bill. like in the sense that I'm talking about right now, right? Like if I say, hey, we're going to write a bill to regulate loan officers, we're going to have Robert Ring write it. That's not going to be, or we're going to have all the bank CEOs write the regulation that their own banks are going to get. It's like, come on, that's a joke, right?
Yeah.
It's like saying we're going to let the mafia write the RICO indictments. So, anyways, I digress. I could go on and on and on and on.
That was good, man. Appreciate you being here, man. What are you doing for Christmas?
I'm going to my family's house in Grass Valley. Just get off the grid for a few days, hang out on the ranch. We got some like sheep and chickens and
Taking the taco up there?
oh yeah, gotta take the taco up there for sure.
That'll be good, man.
Yeah.
That'll be cool.
What are you doing?
Well,
You celebrate Hanukkah, right?
I'm a Jew. I celebrate Hanukkah.
Right on.
We're going to San Diego to see my girlfriend's folks, and then Phoenix to see my family. It's my mom's birthday on the 26th. Happy birthday, Mom.
Happy birthday.
And yeah, so that'll be good.
Cool.
And then we get back. We go to Japan for a couple weeks.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Dude, I love Japan. I've been to Japan.
Yeah, we're going. I'm gonna go snowboarding out there. We're gonna go play in the snow on
That's
Hokkaido,
awesome.
and go to Tokyo and Osaka and Kyoto. So it should be good.
That's super cool, man.
And then when we get back, Trump will be in office, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So if I don't see you, man, happy holidays.
Yeah, likewise, man. Happy holidays. Have a great time.
I really appreciate you being here, and
Sure.
Thanks to all our listeners. Mm-hmm. And reach out if you guys need anything. I always tell clients, like, call me, text me if you need me.
Yeah. Cool, man. All right, brother. See you soon.
All right. Thanks, Robert. Later.